Hi, if you're watching this video, you're watching the fourth lesson in linear relations. In this lesson, we'll be talking about a very important equation called the linear equation, right? It's called the linear equation, and this is what it looks like. Now, the sooner you know this equation, the better, because this equation will show up next year and all the way through high school. And so knowing this equation now is really good for your future in math. So we've done most of this equation already. And I didn't tell you that, but when we found equations that say, oh, okay, y equals, let's say, 4x, right? Well, y, m, x. Now, we're going to focus on that b part. We're going to see how do we find the b part. Well, let's do some review. What is the expression for the data table, right? We have x is 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And y is 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. So just pause the video and see if you can find the expression. All right, so I'm going to move forward. Hopefully you paused it, right? So the x values are going up, right? We can see that by 2 every time, right? And every time the y values are going up by 4. Right? So to find the expression for this table, right, the expression that shows the pattern, I would go y equals, well, y is always, in this case you can see, 2 times larger, right? And let's say it wasn't that easy to figure it out. Okay, you take the change in y, adding 4, so it's going up by 4, and you divide it by the change in x. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. So it would be y is 2x. Whatever y is, it's 2 times whatever x is, right? If x is 6, y must be 12, and that matches. So this expression, right, matches this pattern. And so this expression shows this pattern. So in previous lesson, we showed this picture before, right? The y in our equation or expression represents all the y values. The x represents all the x values. Now, because they represent more than one number, that's why we don't put a number there, right? They represent everything here and everything here, saying that this follows a pattern. The 2 is called the slope, right? The 2 says how steep does the line go, or how steep is the line when you draw this data on a graph. And if you recall, the higher this number, the steeper the graph, right? It goes more vertical. And if you have a negative here, that means the numbers are going down. So for this expression, this is saying y is always 2 times x. Whatever y is, it's 2 times its x value, right? And you can see that in the pattern. Okay, but what if we added 3 to each y value? So instead of x is 2, y is 4, I'm going to add 3 to each level in our table. All right? I'm going to just add 3 to each part in our table. So instead of 2 is when x is 2, y is 4, x is 2, y is 7. And then x is 4, y is 11 instead of 8. Is this data still linear? How can I tell? So pause the video for like 2 seconds and think about it. I added 3 to each part of the table, right? Is the data still linear? Does it create a straight line if I were to graph this information? All right? Well, it is still linear, right? Remember, a data table, this data table, is still linear if the y values change by the same amount each time. So every time this has gone up by 2 in our first set, in our first table, this went up by 4, right? And we found that the expression for this table was y equals 2x, right? Well, does the y change the same amount here? Every time x changes by 2, every time x changes by 2, the y is still changing by 4. Even though I added 3 to each one, it's still going up by 4, right? So yes, It's following a pattern. Every time this goes up by 2, this goes up by 4. So it's still linear. Okay, so if it's linear, that means I can find an expression for it. Well, if it's linear, what's the expression? To find the expression, we need to find the slope first, right? And again, just like before, to find the slope, you find the change in y, in this case 4, and you divide it by the change in x. Went from 2 to 4, so we went up by 2. So 4 divided by 2, right, is 2. Right? So divide how much the y changes by, 7 to 11, went up by 4, divided by how much the x changes by, 2. And so I find a slope of 2. Right here, right? Changing by 4, changing by 2. The y changes by 4. Divide that by the x changing by 2. You get 4 over 2 is 2. Okay. So is our expression y equals 2x just like before? Well, let's check. Because again, we can check our answer. All right. Well, if y is 7, right? If y is 7, it should be 2 times x, or 2. Well, 2 times 2 does not equal 7. So it doesn't work. Right? No. We need to add something. Something needs to be added to our y equals 2x to make it work. What could we add to it? What could we add to our original expression to make it work? Now, some of you are already ahead of me. You realized, well, we added 3 to each value, didn't we? This table, the original table, oh, sorry, it's not the original. Let me fix that. There's our original table. It went from 12, 16, 20. Our original table, right, went from 2x, y equals 2x, to something else. Right? We added 3 to each y value. So if we just add 3 to our pattern, right, wouldn't that work? 2x plus 3. Wouldn't that work? Well, we can check our answer. Okay, well, let's take 4. Okay, y equals, 2 times 4 plus 3. Okay, 2 times 4. Now remember bad math. Multiply first. 2 times 4, right, is 8. Plus 3, 11. It matched. Let's try another one. Let's try 6. Okay, y equals 2 times 6 plus 3. 2 times 6 is 12, just like here, but we added 3, 15. It works. So by adding plus 3 to our expression, we made this expression work. And if you go back to our equation here, we had our y equals mx, right? We had y, let me just erase all this. We had y equals 2x plus 3, right? We found our linear equation that shows us how that table works, right? Does this work? Yes, it does. So, when we look at a linear equation, the linear equation finds all, this is the general equation for all linear relations. So what does this mean? The y represents all the y values, right? So it's always going to be y. The x represents all the x values, so it's going to be x. Now, the slope is unique to each pattern. Different tables may have different slopes. So you'll have a number here. You'll have a number here. And the b, we call this the y-intercept. And when we show you how to find the equation for graphs, you'll see why it's called the y-intercept. Because intercept means to hit or crash into or come across. Right? So let's move forward. So we know y is the y values, m is the slope, right? X is the x values, and b is the y-intercept. Okay. So we know how to get our y and x values. If I gave you a table, you would know which one's your x and which one's your y. If I gave you a graph, you could find your points, which would give you your x and y. we also know how to find our slope, right? It's the change in y divided by the change in x. How do we find b? Well, once we get our slope, b is super easy to find. So let's look at this table. What is the slope of this table? Again, to find the slope, you go, what is my change in x? Okay, 2 over 4, right? 2 to 4, we're going up by 2. And you can see that pattern constantly. Well, we're going from 8 to 14, and then 14 to 20. So we're going up by 6, right? Every time. Okay, to find the slope, I find my change in y and divide it by my change in x. 6 divided by 2, 3. So I now know my slope is 3. So the first part of my equation, right, if we go right back here, y is y, it always stays y. We know m is 3, and then we have our x, right? So y equals 3x. Now, does this work? Well, 3 times 2 is not 8. So far, we still need to add something. And now, some of you may have already said, why don't you just add 2? Okay, but let's say we didn't know that, right? So now we know our expression should be y equals 3x plus b. Now what? Well, now you can just do a substitution. So now we know our equation so far, or expression so far, is y equals 3x plus b. So, how do I find b? I just substitute a value from a row, from the rows on the table. So I pick any row. In this case, I picked 6 and 20. And so I have the expression y equals 3x plus b, and I replace the x and y with a number. In this case, I'm going to replace the x with 6 because that's an x value, right? So you can see that x became the 6 and the y became the 20, right? So now I have 20 equals 3 times 6 plus b. Well, 3 times 6 is 18, so now I know 20 equals 18 plus b. The only way for 18 to equal 20 is by adding 2. So b must be 2. And now I can check my answer, right? So if b is 2, our equation or expression should be y equals 3x, we found the slope, plus 2. Okay, well let's check. Let's pick another row. Let's pick the next row, 8 and 26. Okay, so I replace my y with 26. 26, right, equals 3 times, okay, now my x value is 8, right, plus 2. Again, we do BEDMAS. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 2, 26. They equal. So it works. So we've proven that 3x plus 2 is the linear equation for this table. And that's it. So our equation should be y equals 3x plus 2. You can check your answer by just picking any row, replacing the x and y values, and seeing if it matches. So find the equations for each linear relationship. Find the equations for each linear equation or find each linear relationship. So pause the video and see if you can solve it. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video. Hopefully I gave you enough time to pause the video. And we're going to solve these. So I went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So I'm going up by 1 on this side. Every time the x goes up by 1, the y went up by 4. 9, 4, right? 13, 17, 4. 17 to 21, 4. So then I go, okay, my expression so far should be y equals, to find the slope, 4 change in y divided by the change in x. So 4 divided by 1 is 4. 4x, right, plus b. Okay. So then if I do that, I can pick any row, pick any section. I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to pick the easy one. I'm going to pick the easy one. I'm going to start with x is 1, right? X is 1. and y is 5. Pick the smallest numbers. Easy to do. Now, y should be 5, so I replace my y with 5, right? Equals 4 times, what's my x? 1 plus b. Okay, well, 5 equals 4 times 1 plus b. 4 times 1 is 4, right? So for 4 to turn into 5, I need to add 1. So b must be 1. So my equation should be y equals 4x plus 1. And I can check my answer. Let's pick a higher number. Let's pick 3 and 13. All right, 4, right? So now I have 13, right? I'm replacing the y with 13 equals 4 times, what's my x? 3 plus 1. Bed mass, 4 times 3, 12 plus 1 is 13. It matches, it works. And that's how you find the equation. Let's do another one. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going up by 1. Here, I'm going up by 3. You can see that 4 to 7, 7 to 10, 10 to 13, 13 to 16. To find my slope, change in y divided by change in x. It changes by 3 divided by changing by 1 is 3. So now I know my equation, right? Y equals 3x plus b. Now I pick any one. And again, pick the smallest row. It's the easiest one to do. 1 and 4. Done. Okay. Now I replace my y with 4. 4 equals 3. X is now 1 times 1 plus b. Okay, 3 times 1 is 3. To turn 3 into 4, I need to add 1. So b should be 1 again. Okay, so my equation should be y equals 3x, right? 3x plus 1. And I can check my answer. Pick another one. Let's pick 2 and 7. Okay, if x is 2 and y is 7, so 7 equals 3, and then the x's are 2 plus 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. It works. So we know that this pattern works. And now I'd recommend doing it like one more time to make sure, but so far it seems to be working pretty well. All right, let's do another one. How much are my x's changing by? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going up by 1. Okay, I'm going from 0 to 2, 2 to 4. So I'm going up by 2. Okay, my change in y is 2, and my change in x is 1. Now, a common mistake people will make is they'll say, oh, my change in y, that's my slope. No, no, no. If x was going up by more than 1, you would need to divide it by that number. So a common practice would be to just follow these steps. Change in y divided by change in x. 2 divided by 1 is 2. So I know my slope should be 2, so y equals 2x, now plus b. Right? Okay, now I pick any row. I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to pick when y equals 0. 1, 0. Okay, so 0, right, equals 2 times x is 1, right, plus b. Okay, well, 2 times 1 is 2, right, plus b. Well, what plus 2, what adds to 2 to make 0? That's weird, you're adding. Maybe I should try a negative, right? 2 plus negative 2 is 0, right? Okay, so b must be negative 2. But isn't it plus b? That's fine. So we can write the equation like this. Y equals 2x minus 2 instead, right? Let's check our answer. 1, so x is 1, y is 0. So 1 times 2 is 2, minus 2 is 0. Perfect. Let's check another one. 2. If x is 2, y is 2. Okay. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 2 is 2. It matches, so it works. Right? Let's check this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going up by 1. Here we're going up by plus 3, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2. Oh! So this one doesn't work. And so you have to be careful, right? Here I went up by plus 3 when this went up by plus 1. And here I went up by plus 2, plus 2, plus 3. And so you can see, if you don't check and if you're not careful, you might fall for this trick, right? So you want to be careful because sometimes I'll give you a table and say, give me the equation when you can't do that. So make sure you check. Are x's changing constantly with the y's? Or at least are the y's changing constantly as well, right? So special note, b can be negative, right? We saw that on this example. B can be negative. And if b is negative, instead of y equals mx plus b, you just have mx minus b, right? Because b is negative. That's it. Right? Because if you're adding a negative, like before, it was minus 2 here, right? So it would be y equals 2x plus minus 2. That's the same as saying 2x minus 2, right? So you can just do minus b instead if your b is negative, all right? So we're going to do some practice questions, and I highly recommend you doing them because the linear equation is very important and it'll keep coming up again and again and again. And I find a lot of students have trouble with the linear equation. They just need to break it down. You know how to find slope. X and y, just stay x and y. It's finding b. It's just finding your b. All right? So in the next lesson, instead of using tables, we'll be using graphs. See you next lesson.